As a 30-year veteran police officer, I can honestly say that I've witnessed some truly remarkable things. And especially, in the worst sense of the word, things that would chill your blood. But none of that compares to what I experienced. The night of October 16th, 2012. Until now, I've tried to forget all that. Thinking back, the night started off well. It was a typical autumn night. It was cool, I would even say cold, and dead leaves covered the road in a layer of yellow and brown. Nothing extraordinary for our pretty little town. That night, I was partnered with a new girl recently transferred from a nearby town. She was like all the other rookies I had worked with, young, with a fresh face, bright eyes, and all the other cliches you can think of. She was all set to be trained for the field, her brown hair perfectly styled, and her uniform freshly ironed. Next to her, I looked like a real trash bag. Despite that, I liked her, that little one. The town we lived in was surrounded by dense, dark, and deep forests. You might say I'm crazy, but to me, forests that old had a kind of personality, if you know what I mean. Since I started working here, tons of people had disappeared in those forests, and most of them were never found. I don't particularly like the word disappeared, because when you say that, it feels like it's nobody's fault. But for me, nowadays, you don't just disappear without someone's help. Have you been here for a long time? And I asked Blue. The fog was starting to settle in, so I turned on my headlights.
No, not that long, sir.
She answered, so focused on what she had to do that she seemed lost. I smiled and took a sip of coffee. I swear to you, whoever decided that bitterness was a bad thing had never had their coffee black. Stop with that Mr. nonsense, I'm not that old. And I say with a laugh that's turned into something else. Too many cigarettes, I guess. And you just came from...
Dallas, sir? Just Dallas.
She said nervously, running her hand through her hair.
Dallas.
I heard it's nice there at this time of year. And I replied as I turned onto True Lane, before heading toward the small roads of Lowgate. It was my routine patrol. You were in narcotics, right? Yes, but then she paused, trying not to say the word sir.
3 years.
I noticed that she relaxed after that, and took the same tone as me. I had heard about the sergeants and captains in Dallas, and apparently they were all unbearable. She must have gotten yelled at countless times to end up looking like some kind of Barbie in a police uniform. The composed and neat style had never been my thing. For me, practicality was the most important, efficiency. And are you happy working here? I asked.
Can I be completely honest with you?
She said, her voice turning oddly solemn. Yes, of course, tell me.
I have to admit that I'm quite nervous.
She replied, turning toward the window, as if she were ashamed. Hey, I said, patting her shoulder reassuringly. It's your first day at work. People get stressed in these situations, and perfection isn't expected.
No, it's not because of that.
Then what is it because of? And then she told me several stories about the city, several strange and unsolved cases. I was surprised by what she was telling me, but she kept going.
These are the stories I've heard about this city.
I see.
Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Let's move on.
No, it's nothing. Everyone who lives nearby hears about it. And I say with a sigh, I was looking in my rearview mirror. There was absolutely nothing behind us. Which of these stories traumatized you the most?
Well, people who disappear mysterious deaths, but the worst, I think, are all the stories about Satanism.
I chuckled softly and sighed again. Stories like that tend to stick in people's minds. I suppose it will be a century before we witness another case of Satanism in this area. What happened to those goats might have been caused by animals, but what happened to that little girl years ago was truly horrible. But that doesn't mean the devil or anything else had anything to do with it.
The little girl?
She asked. I could hear the nervousness in her voice. You haven't heard about it? I hated that story. In 1965, little Marie Attaway ventured into the woods. She didn't come home. And after a long search, she was found gutted from her throat all the way down to her belly. The new girl turned toward the window. She lightly hid her face to conceal her disgust, which I understood. We drove in silence for a little while. The atmosphere was heavy inside and outside the car. Outside, the branches of the trees seemed to get closer and closer to the car, as if they were desperate for company. I felt like it scared her because she moved away from the window.
There are people in the forest.
She said, as if she was convinced of every word she spoke.
There are a lot of people.
What? I asked incredulously.
No, seriously, I see people. They're wearing coats with hoods, kind of like capes. There are so many of them. They look like shadows behind the trees. I think they're watching us.
Suddenly, I saw something on the road and I braked so hard that I could have given both of us whiplash. We were thrown forward, me toward the steering wheel and the new girl toward the dashboard. Honestly, it was a miracle that the airbags didn't deploy.
Damn, but why did you stop?
Did she balk before realizing that it was insubordination? Something was on the road, that's why. I growled as I unbuckled my seatbelt to investigate the commotion outside. I ignored her as she rambled on again about the alleged people hiding in the woods. She was scared and didn't know what she was saying. "Don't go out," she hissed through clenched teeth. I could see the fear in her wide eyes. "It's okay to be scared, kid." And I answered as I leaned toward her. "But fear is like faith, you have to invest it in the right things. Now exit the vehicle. Staying together is safer, right? Two heads to think and two guns to act." She nodded and got out of the car abruptly, one hand on her weapon. We moved toward what I had seen on the ground, and the only thing lighting our way was my car's headlights, barely piercing through the fog.
Is that a deer?
Apparently, yes. The broken and unattractive carcass in front of us looked like that of a young deer that couldn't have been more than 10 years old. The deer had its throat slit from ear to ear, which gave it a kind of macabre smile. In its bloodied fur, the blood looked dried. It hadn't just died.
What's that on its side?
She said as she turned on her flashlight and pointed it at the deer's chest.
It looks like runes or some kind of hieroglyphs.
Someone had carved symbols into the deer's side, soaking its fur with dried blood. The only times blood doesn't look brown when it's dry is when it's on something the same color.
No, that's not possible. That's Satanism.
Hey, calm down. It's likely just some kids playing a bad prank on us. They always play nasty Halloween pranks like this.
But how can you say that?
She shouted while looking at me to ensure she had my attention.
It starts with a deer, and then after that it's...
All of a sudden, the silence of the night was disturbed by sobbing. They were human cries, and they sounded very young.
It's a little girl.
The news seemed frozen as the little girl appeared in the fog and walked toward the light of our headlights. She was young, about 9 years old, and she was wearing a white silk dress that didn't seem to belong to her. Looking at her, she seemed injured, definitely malnourished, and the bruises around her wrists showed that she had been kept in captivity. "Help me," she murmured between sobs. Then she fell to her knees and cried even harder. It was only then that I noticed the symbols that had been carved behind her left hand, and how much they resembled the ones that had been carved on the deer. The newcomer ran toward her and lifted her up as if she were a rag doll. I ran toward her as well and saw that she was crying too. "Hey, what happened, sweetheart?" "They have..."
Kidnapped. They wanted to kill me. They made me.
"Show a knife." "Who took you? Who tried to kill you?" The little girl freed one of her arms from my colleague's embrace and pointed her finger toward the fog. "It's them, my God." There was one, then two, then three, until the little army of hooded men seemed endless. They were humming and murmuring incomprehensible songs. They came out from behind the trees in the fog and surrounded us. The newcomer regained her composure and pointed her weapon defensively while shouting.
Back off! I said back off, damn it!
One of the hooded figures stepped forward. Looking more closely, it was clear he was different from the rest. His cloak was dark red instead of black, and a small crossed stag antler emblem was sewn onto his chest. Whether it's a badge, a uniform, or some kind of rank insignia, you quickly learn to recognize the signs of authority. "Give us back our lives," the hooded figure asked. His voice was masculine, deep, and cavernous, as if it were amplified by the forest. His flesh and blood belong to our horned god, who provides safety and prosperity. You have no right to take her back.
What a total psychopath.
She shouted, aiming her gun at the man's head.
You must really be crazy if you think I'm going to give it back to you.
She put the little girl down, but kept an arm around her. I could hear her breathing deep and fast. She was desperate, and she used anger to hide her fear. She prepared to cock her gun, an action likely familiar from television. But I stopped her because I didn't want to make things worse. "That horned god," I began, trying to stay calm. "What do you have to do with him?" A collective hiss was made simultaneously by all the members of the group. The man in the red cloak made them stop with a wave of his hand. "We are his disciples," he said calmly. "We fulfill his prayers, we exercise his authority, and we pray to him. But our God doesn't care about words. He also needs to sacrifice people with innocent flesh." Who seemed to be trying to send me a message. I felt like she was trying to tell me to keep him talking. I saw her finger on the trigger. "And how many sacrifices do you plan to make to your God?" And I asked the leader, and he replied, "As many as we can." I sighed and drew my weapon from its holster. Then I put my finger on the trigger. "I'm sorry this is happening to you on your first night, kid." I addressed the new girl, who looked at me with a confused expression. And before she could say anything, I raised my gun and shot her in the stomach. The little girl screamed and collapsed on the floor, sobbing. I shot again, but this time it was in the head. Blood and pieces of skull spread across the floor. The little girl was screaming even louder. What a waste. And I say with a sigh, I really liked that little girl. She was really nice. The leader and his henchmen started to surround the bodies of my former colleague and the little girl. "Her flesh will make a fine sacrifice for our God." "You're becoming unmanageable." Did I scold them as I looked at them one by one? "If you hadn't let him escape, I never would have had to shoot him." The hooded man said, "Our God works in mysterious ways, my child," as the little girl was dragged away. She struggled, screamed, then quickly disappeared into the woods and the mist. Gradually, those screams of terror faded away. "Don't worry, I'm sure our God won't let that happen a second time." I grunted in disgust and started walking toward my vehicle. Without looking back, I told them, "Take his body and the damn greenhouse with it." When I finally reached the car and turned around, everything was gone. The disciples, the greenhouse, the girl, and the new one. I don't think we've seen them again since. Of course, I told the captain what happened, but for the blue one's family, we made up a story. We said she was killed by a bear and that she died bravely trying to save a little girl and so on. It had been decades since we had killed a new recruit because she came across something like that. It irritated me that I had to handle it. But that's how it is. Sometimes you have to know how to make the right decisions. Because if there's one thing we don't want in this city, it's for the Horned God to resurface.